So what exactly is kombucha? Well, it's a fermented tea that actually relies on sugar to ferment. So what I actually have here and what we use here is an organic cane sugar. So very different from like your red past sugars, okay? So this is an unprocessed type of sugar. And what that does is it creates an acidic environment inside this tea that we have made here. And what's really unique about kombucha is it actually uses two different environments to ferment. So it uses an aerobic environment and an anaerobic environment. Do you guys know what I mean by aerobic? An anaerobic? Good. So the first fermentation process we see, or the first stage, is aerobic. So what we're actually seeing is this thing actually having an oxygen-rich environment after we put that Scoby in there. And as it's allowed to breathe, the culture starts producing oxygen, and it starts to break down those nutrients with that oxygen that's coming in. The second stage is anaerobic, and you can actually see I've started some tea here. This was started April 28th, and if you come have a look at it, you can see that we're starting to see that second stage starting there. So you can see there's a Scoby that's starting to grow along the top. Okay, and as that Scoby grows along the top, it starts out very, very thin. And eventually what it'll do is it'll completely encompass that entire top of that tea. And what it'll do is it'll create that anaerobic environment. It'll seal everything up inside of it. And during this time, it's actually creating carbon monoxide, and it's also creating ethanol as well. Now you may say ethanol, hey, that's alcohol. Yeah, it is alcohol. But one of the things that the kombucha is doing while it's brewing is it's actually going to eat that ethanol that's in there. And that's what creates those health benefits that we find in kombucha. So as the anaerobic gas actually builds up with the brew, we'll eventually give it that fizziness. So that's what the carbon dioxide is actually doing, is producing that fizziness that we get in kombucha. So what are the benefits? Well, we made guys who had classes with me. We talked a couple of weeks ago about the microbiome and the gut, and how that's a big foundation of our own mental health. So what the kombucha does is it actually produces its own probiotics, right? And we often think about taking probiotics. We often recommend them if you're doing a course of antibiotics to have the probiotics coming in. Well, these guys produce their own probiotics. It's a daily probiotic drink. And what they do is they actually feed that good bacteria in that gut. Remember, that good bacteria is what's producing things like neurotransmitters. It's producing B vitamins, producing vitamins like vitamin K. It's helping us to break down our food. It's helping us to feel less gassy. So those probiotics are really, really important, not only for gut health, but also for brain health as well. Remember that serotonin, our happy hormone, about 90% of it is actually made in the gut. And if we don't have these gut bacteria, I call them gut buddies, then we're not going to be making serotonin. If we're not making serotonin, we're not happy. If we're not making serotonin, we're not making melatonin, so we're not sleepy. And sleepy and unhappy is a very horrible combination, as you guys probably know. It's also rich in something called polyphenols. And polyphenols, these are micronutrients. And what they do is they're a rich source of antioxidants. So they have actually been helping to improve things like digestive disorders. They can help with weight management, diabetes management, neurodegenerative diseases such as Alzheimer's, and cardiovascular disease as well. It's also a rich source of vitamin C. So vitamin C, we know, really important for our immune health. We know to take vitamin C when we get sick. But vitamin C also really important to brain health as well. We need vitamin C in order to produce, again, certain neurotransmitters. So how our brain chemistry works is very important to vitamin C too. And then we got B vitamins coming in there, and that's where some people get that little energy from drinking kombucha, and some people will do it in the afternoon. And those B vitamins, they work on things like metabolism, energy, red blood cell formation, neurotransmitters, again. So a lot of what we're seeing in here, we're seeing like a triple hit of things that are really good for not only for gut health, but also for mental health as well. So kombucha can be really important. It's why it's key component of our program that we have here, because we want to approach mental health and addiction from several different sort of approaches, as opposed to just attacking it head on through talk therapy, which is good. We need that. We also need the other things that are not working in our life, or the other things that are making us not feel good, that may have us reaching for substances as well. And that's why we use things like food in order to help mitigate some of those symptoms. If we feel good, we're less likely to return to addiction. So how do we actually make kombucha? So one of the first things we want to do is we want to get ourselves a tea, okay? And we have a few different teas that we can use. So I have a green tea that's here, and you can use like a loose leaf green tea. And then I also have a bagged green tea. I have a white tea, and I also have a rooibos tea as well. So either of those would be fine. What we don't want is flavored teas, okay? So we want a tea that's unflavored, because what this Scoby is going to be end up eating is things that it knows, which is sugar, water, and tea. If we introduce a different component to it, we could harm our Scoby, and it may not be able to digest that very well. So we want just a plain tea. We need our organic sugar, as we talked about. We need clean filtered water. So if you don't have a water filter at home, I often will just buy the water from like the spring water. You can also go on findaspring.com and get your own spring water, which is really awesome to fill up containers with. And then you need some glass containers, and you need these to be sterilized. So if you have a dishwasher, or getting them through the dishwasher, because what we're creating, this environment that we're creating is susceptible to certain things. We want to make sure that this is really clean. So once we have everything that we need, we're going to make our tea. And we just made a big batch the other day, and this is just a small part of that. There is a recipe in the book for a smaller batch of the kombucha. So once we make our tea, we're going to let it sit until it cools down. You can leave the tea bags in there. We've already added our sugar, and once it's come up to a boil, and then we're going to let that cool. So once this is completely cool, then we can start working with it. We're going to get it into our jars like I have here. And then the other thing we're going to add, so this is just a little bit of Scoby Starter. Okay, so this is from a previous batch that of kombucha that I have brewed. And you can either use from a previous batch that you've had before, or you can buy some kombucha as well, just unflavored, again, from the health food store. And that's going to go into this here, which is our tea. If you don't have either of those, the other thing you can do as well is add in just a tablespoon of apple cider vinegar. So we're creating an acidic environment in there, because that's what this Scoby actually lives in. So what is a Scoby? It's a symbiotic culture of bacteria and yeast. And those things work together to create what we're going to get as our kombucha here. So this is kind of like a little helper. It's a booster to start growing that Scoby. Once we have our tea, we're going to take our Scoby here. We've been giving away a lot of Scobies to alumni that have been leaving, but normally I have a whole hotel. This is a Scoby Hotel. I'm going to talk to you about the hotels in just a few minutes. But as you can see here, I have my Scoby. And he looks like this. Okay? I know he's kind of strange looking, he's kind of funny looking, and you're going, looks like something from Alien. You can see they have this back that'll form on here as well. Okay, so this is our Scoby. And we're just going to take him and we're going to add him into our jar. So what will normally happen is first is that our Scoby will actually sink to the bottom. And then it eventually will start to get that lid that's it's going to be building on itself. So once your Scoby's in there, you're going to let that sit. Now how long you're going to let that sit for depends a lot on the temperature in your room, okay? So in winter, you're going to probably take a little bit longer to brew. In summer, it's going to be a little bit quicker. So from anywhere from about 2 weeks to about a month. So the last brew that I did that you guys have been drinking took about a month for us to brew. As I said, this one's been going since April 28th, and you can see it's just starting to build its own Scoby, so it's got a little ways to go yet still, okay? I like to start testing mine once I start to see a nice big Scoby starting to be created on top. That's actually starting to get a little bit thicker. And when we have a nice healthy Scoby, this is actually what it looks like. Okay, so it looks like that. Once I start getting a nice healthy Scoby, then I'll start tasting it. And how you know it's ready, if we were to take a little bit of this right now, it's very sweet. When it's ready, it'll have sort of a tangy kind of taste to it. Okay, we don't want vinegar, we've gone too far. We want to be able to taste that all the sugars have kind of been eaten and been dissolved, and that's when our Scoby is ready. If you're not tasting that yet, let it be, let it sit again, test it again in another couple of days. Do you have a question, Dave? You look like maybe you have a question.
No.
Okay, wanted to make sure I'm not losing anybody.
Always looks like that.
I always look confused.
You always look confused? Okay, so what's gonna happen as you continue to brew your batches is eventually the Scoby is gonna continue to get these layers, okay? And this is called the mama. And eventually the mama is gonna produce us a little baby. And then we know when mama and baby are ready to be separated when you can pick it up and the baby will fall right off of mama, okay? And then that baby can then be turned into a mama and create its own babies. And we sort of get this cycle that goes on where we're constantly creating these nice little kombuchas. And the thicker your Scoby gets, the more carbonation you're going to get into your final Scoby as well. So we want a nice thick Scoby that's happening there. So what do we do when we have these babies that are piling up and we don't have enough kombucha to make? Well, that's when we get into making something called a Scoby Hotel, which is what I have here. So if mama's produced us a nice baby, and maybe we want to use mama again, and we can use mama several times. How we know when mama is ready to be retired is mama will go very, very dark, almost black. And that's when it's time for mama to be retired and replace your Scoby with a baby. Don't throw out your Scobies though, okay? You can use these guys later. So even after it's sort of lost some of its potential, some other things you can do with it is actually chop it up and add it to your compost bin. Very healthy, your worms will love it. You can also chop it up and mix it into your soil in the garden as well, and it'll continue to feed your soil. So very important, don't throw those out, don't get rid of those, they still have value. So let's say we've got a baby that we've produced and we want to leave that baby because we don't have anything to make with it right now. We're going to take some of our brewed liquid. So let's say this is done and it's brewed. We add it to a 1 liter container. I have 4 liter because we use a lot of kombucha here. You're gonna pour in some of the finished kombucha, unflavored, into here, add your baby, and set it aside. So you would have a hotel whenever you are taking a break from making Scoby, or from making kombucha, if you're going on vacation, or if you're just producing a lot of these Scobies, that you can just kind of hang out in here. So quite often we'll have an entire jar filled with these Scobies, which is really exciting. And then you can share them with friends. Other things you can do with your healthy Scobies, you can actually take them and puree them into your smoothies. So you're getting a really good kick of good bacteria in your gut. You can also take little bits and give them to your dog as well. Put them into their dog food, really good for their gut too. So once we have our finished tea here, let's say this has been brewing, we've tested it, it tastes good, there's not any of that sweetness left. We're ready to start making a flavored kombucha. And we can do this a few different ways. One of the ways is to introduce a juice. Okay, again, you want just pure juice. So you don't want your apple juice from concentrate. You want a good quality juice with nothing added to it. And if you're doing a juice, you're going to do about 3 cups of your kombucha to about 1 cup of your apple juice, let's say. Okay. You're going to add that in, and you're going to take a little tiny bit of Scoby. Again, you're going to add that in there. You're going to stick a lid on this guy, and you're going to let it sit for another 2 to 3 days. And what's going to happen is that new little piece of Scoby that's in there sitting with those new sugars is again going to create that environment with all that carbon dioxide in there, and you're going to get a fizzy drink coming out of this. The other way you can also flavor this as well, and what we do here is we actually use fresh fruit. And you can use pretty much any fruit that you like. We like to use berries here. And I like to use quite a bit. I actually like it when the kombucha takes on the color of the fruit itself. So what you'll want to do is to get a good amount of fruit, and there's recipes in those books there for you guys on kind of ratios and some flavoring ideas. There's a blueberry ginger, which is one of my favorites. I think there's a strawberry in there. You're going to take your fruit, and I like to smash it up, because that's going to help release some of those sugars. It's going to help release some of those colors that are in there. And we're going to add it to our kombucha and let it sit for another about 2 to 3 days, as I said. Okay, once we've had it set for about 2 to 3 days, we're going to throw it in the fridge. You can strain it if you want. You can leave the fruit in. And then you've got a kombucha that's ready to go, which is really exciting. So the other thing you can do with your kombucha once you've had it brewed and you flavored it is you can actually make popsicles with it as well. Again, a nice little treat in the summer, and there's actually a recipe in there as well. So if you've ever had kids, or you remember when you were a kid, those little plastic popsicle containers that you can pour anything into. You can do that with the kombucha. Add in some fresh berries, and then you're also getting in a nice little probiotic drink, but you're getting a nice little summer sort of treat.